Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Claudine Russell, the Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to this 13th of November meeting of the committee. The meeting is going to be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anybody else be recording the proceedings? Councillor Mackay?
I reserve my right.
Thank you. I ask just so that people at the meeting know this will be happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated. Members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Moving on to tonight's agenda, item number 1, apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillor Hickson. Any other apologies? Can't see anyone missing. Item number 2 is substitute members. Can't see any of those. Item 3 is the urgent items. We don't have any urgent items, but we did have the housing pack last night, and they considered one of the items that we'll be considering in our agenda tonight. So there is a draft minute which is detailing the recommendations that they made at the Housing Community Cohesion Pack, and this has been circulated. It's that one pager. I don't know, has everyone had a chance to have a look at it, or do you want to have a few minutes? No, you're good? Okay, item number 4, I can't see any visiting members. Item 5, are there any disclosures by members or officers? Councillor Keeley.
Thank you. Just wanted to point out with regards to item 15 that I work for the Maidstone Churches Winter Shelter, which provides emergency accommodation for homeless people experiencing homelessness, just so I'm completely transparent with regards to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. But still happy to take part in the item and vote? Yeah, thank you. Lovely, thank you. Item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying?
I'm not really sure, just wanted to clarify. So I've had a resident regarding housing allocation from about 6 months ago, so I don't know if that's regarded as lobbying or before it came up on this agenda sort of thing.
No, thank you for mentioning it, Councillor Wilkinson, but I think we're looking afresh at how the housing allocation would be altered, so I think you're fine with that. Thank you. Item 7, sorry, I didn't see any other disclosures or anything. No. Item 7, I propose all items will be taken in public as proposed. Is this agreed? Lovely. Item 8 is the minutes of the meeting that were held on the 9th of October on your pack, agenda pack pages 1 to 4. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? Can't see anyone looking to speak, so I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of October 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? That brings us to items 9 through 11. We don't have any petitions this evening, we don't have any questions from local residents, and we don't have any questions from members. Moving to item 12, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan, pages 5 to 16 of your agenda pack. So take a couple of minutes to look through there, and I just wondered if anyone from the committee would like to conduct pre-decision scrutiny on any of these or have any comments. Yeah, sorry, go.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Not so much asking for any of these to come in, but more, I suppose, a point of concern is obviously I know there was a workshop on the new strategic plan approach in October, but I notice the strategic plan isn't referenced in the Cabinet Forward Plan. Now, for the budget to be approved in line with a revised strategic plan, the strategic plan needs to be approved in advance of the budget. And as the budget is working its way through sort of December, January, and up to the February council meeting, I wondered when the strategic plan was likely to be working through, because if it doesn't, we won't be able to take any account of it in setting either the medium-term financial strategy or the budget for next year. It will have to be done on the basis of the current strategic plan and the current medium-term financial strategy. And to change either of those documents obviously will require quite a lot of work and probably call in or review by this committee, and they're just not appearing on any agenda items. So I suppose it's a question really for the officer. Is my understanding is unless we do have a new strategic plan and therefore a new medium-term financial strategy, the budget for 2025-26 will have to be prepared and agreed by the council on the basis of the current strategic plan and the current medium-term financial strategy. And linked to that is a concern that if these things are only going to be approved at the very last minute before the council meeting next February, and if they're subject to call-ins, that could give us further problems. And that's partly why our meetings at the moment are so thin now, is that until that goes through the system, obviously the administration isn't able to do anything much because no policy changes have come through in the almost last year. And I'm just concerned that we're suddenly going to be flooded with a level of work we won't be able to undertake once we get the other side of Christmas. And I just wondered perhaps if Cassie had any advance warning as when things like the strategic plan are likely to come and see the daylight.
I know obviously that we've got fees and charges coming in on the 18th of December, that's on the forward plan, but you're quite right, it's heavily loaded in December, and it looks like the latest date we've got on here for anything currently is 22nd of January. I mean, it evolves each time, but I think you're quite right in what you're saying. It looks like it's going to be backloaded sort of to January time that we can expect that, but I don't know if Cassie's got any more detail on when those two items might hit the forward plan.
So it was the strategic plan, what was the other one?
And the budget.
I know that the head of Insight Communities and Governance had said in the Planning and Healthier Stronger Communities that she was going to follow that up after the meeting, which I was just looking at today, so I will chase that up with her. I haven't had any other details about the strategic plan because I know that it was being looked at for pre-decision scrutiny as well, but I will look into that tomorrow for you. And the budget, I'm not sure about either, so I need to chase that up as well.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Wilkinson and then Councillor Cook, please.
On the forward plan, the discussion around community larders would be a good one. In Shepway, it's a very important service, as I imagine it is elsewhere in Maidstone, what the changes are going to be happening to them. Thank you.
Is that so? I'll take this point in the round before I come to Councillor Cook to see if anyone has a comment on that. No. So how does the committee feel about bringing the community larders item to have a look at the pre-decision scrutiny? Is that agreed by everyone? Agreed. Thank you. Cassie will add that to our forward plan. Coming to Councillor Cook next, then.
I didn't say anything on community larders because I as a trustee of the Fusion Healthy Living Centre, Fusion have been discussing taking over the management and running a number of the community larders on behalf of the council. So I made a point, and if it could be minuted through you, Chairman, that because I didn't declare an interest, I hadn't appreciated that was going to be raised in the way that it was. As it was raised, I think there was an interest there as a trustee of Fusion. I wanted to just mention and support the comments about the budget, because the way that the budget is prepared, there has to be time for the budget to be properly scrutinised, not just by the PACs in terms of those areas, but the whole budget needs to be subject to scrutiny through this committee before it goes to council. And in terms of the consultation, the feedback from consultation, and it will probably, I would expect, the budget to appear on our agendas at least twice between now and when it appears on the full county council one. And really, through you, Claudine, to Cassie, where is the opportunity, and is that programmed in to the work schedule for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, please?
A couple of points to pick up on there. I think at the group leaders meeting, it was mentioned that the budget's going to hit the packs in January. So we are running right to the end of this on the timescale. But I appreciate that there is the item that's stated the 22nd of January, so I can only assume that that's going to be added in. But we will get that detail back from you. Cassie will ask those questions on both the strategic plan and the budget and when it'll hit there. I was just going to pick up your point about the larders. I don't think you need it, thank you for mentioning it, but I think you're good for tonight because we're only talking about the forward plan. But you obviously might want to consider your position before we look at that item as a committee coming forward.
As it stands at the moment, the Fusion are not going forward with a proposal
Okay,
to do
yeah,
that.
we
So
don't
that's not.
need to know the
But I
detail,
didn't.
but
I
yeah.
just didn't. I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just come back on the budget thing through you, Chairman? I'm really concerned that, I mean, as an authority, we talk about transparency and doing things. If we're talking about the budget, there is nothing more important than this council does, and I'm genuinely concerned that not sufficient time is being programmed into the schedule of meetings to allow for the proper scrutiny and overview of the most important item that we as members will have to look at. It's just, you know, there needs to be time given to this, and if there's not, then there is something very, very wrong and remiss. So I think could an officer please write to me, and if other members of the committee are interested, then they're more than welcome to be copied in. But I really want to understand and be clear in my own mind that we, as an overview and scrutiny committee, and I know Claudine, as chairman, you're equally concerned about this, will be given and afforded the appropriate time and opportunity to do our job, which is to scrutinise the budget. Thank you.
Quite correct. I think we must remember that the strategic plan is going to go in quite a vastly different direction, and those two documents do work together. So it's the two that we need. We need the strategic plan. We've had some workshops on the strategic plan and how that's changing. So I would expect that now to dovetail through. But I think if the committee is minded, we would seek clarification, and if we could have that emailed to the full committee on the steps when we will get the pre-decision scrutiny on the strategic plan and on the budget, and then we'll send that around. That'd be great. So I've got Councillor Field, it's going to follow Councillor Field, Councillor Parfitt, Councillor Harper, and then I'll come to you, Councillor McKay. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. I did also want to raise on the strategic plan. I'd echo some of the concerns raised by other members of the committee. I wonder if the way through is if you and I as Chair and Vice Chair request an off-calendar briefing from the Democratic Services Department on the current timing for the strategic plan and its relationship with the budget. And if it would satisfy members of the committee, then we can either take on satisfying ourselves that we will have time within the timetable, or requesting an extraordinary meeting if we feel that it's pertinent to do so, to allow time for proper scrutiny and process of the both. So I'd like to formally propose that we seek that meeting as Chair and Vice Chair with Democratic Services, and on that basis, if members of the committee would agree, take it forward that we can establish that this committee will have appropriate oversight and time, with dispensation from the committee, to request an extraordinary meeting be timetabled should the calendar as established not allow.
That sounds like a very Oh, yes.
I appreciate Rob's suggestion there, and particularly appreciate the suggestion of maybe, if necessary, an extraordinary meeting or a special meeting of the group. And I think that's a good. That might be necessary. But in terms of the chairman of Scrutiny with the vice chairman of the Scrutiny, are you not able to request a briefing and an update on that without a motion from the? I would have thought that was normal business of the chair and the vice chair anyway. And the reason I say that through you, Chairman, is I really want to. I think, you know, as members, I think that information needs to be cascaded to all of us in a timely way. And my request was for, and I thought it had been accepted, was for the officer was going to look at that and report to us as a committee as on whole. But there's nothing to stop you, as chairman, as vice chairman, requesting a briefing at any time. That's the nature of being chairman and vice chairman of a committee on a council.
Councillor Cook, I don't think we need to split hairs on this. I think we were just trying to find a sensible way forward. I think the email is one thing. The email is not the mechanism that puts another meeting in the calendar. That's with Democratic Services. So I think I'd be happy to take both approaches. I'll get the steps, send it to the committee. I don't think Councillor Field and I were intending to keep the information top secret anyway. And then we can have the meeting with the Democratic Services with the look to see if we need to programme in an extra meeting for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, just so that we get the full and proper time to look at both the documents. Okay, I've got Councillor Puff. Oh, so I'm going to second that from the chair. Is that way forward agreed? Lovely. I've got Councillor Parfitt next. Thank you.
Just a very simple question to the Cabinet member. The discretionary rate relief policy, what is that?
You pay your rates and you maybe get buildings are empty, 50%, and those sort of things.
Yes, obviously. I just wondered why it was in the climate transition portfolio, that's all.
I think because that was the old policy and resources, so now it's climate transition, corporate and environmental services, so that will come under the corporate services part of that. So,
Thank you.
That's all right. I've got Councillor Harper, then I'm going to Councillor McKay and then Councillor Cannon. So Councillor Harper, please.
Yeah, I think the motion we've just agreed is a good way forward to take this, because as with anything, a decision can be called in by only 3 members of the council. My concern is if both, say, the medium-term financial plan and the strategic plan are rushed and are not given sufficient oversight by this committee and or other committees, then it will only require 3 members of the council to call in the decision after it's been to cabinet, and therefore those decisions cannot be acted on until a meeting of this committee is held. Now, given that the whole timetable was slipped to virtually midnight, if 3 councillors were to call in either of those items, I suspect the February council meeting won't be able to be held. Because, you know, the way it's going is there would not be time to actually do a relevant call-in, which worries me is that the way the void we're in at the moment, it's more likely than not that that's how this could end up going if we're not careful. I noticed, and actually just something else while people were talking, I noticed something else not on this plan, but it's something which we've been waiting for just over a year, is an update on the town centre plan. People who are on the council prior to the local elections this year will remember the council was working on a town centre plan, and it had got to the point where it was about to go to consultation, I seem to remember, and there was a pause put on it. Well, that pause was over a year ago. I think there's a difference between a pause and a stop. So if we actually are going to have a town centre plan, again, it's got to feature somewhere. And the council policy is for a town centre, a group of town centre ward councillors to be involved, of which I'm one. The last meeting I think I went to was well over a year ago on this. So we just don't seem as a council to be doing anything. When you look at the action plan for the Cabinet, apart from government consultations and a few statutory reports we've got to do, there really is no policy decisions. And yet, in July, and right enough, and everybody supported it, the leader did a leader's speech, outlined some of what he wished to achieve. None of it can be done until we're in a situation where we're actually making decisions. And I just think, it's not particularly good as a council to be in a situation where we've gone on meeting after meeting. Meetings are so thin on the agendas. I think there was one I noticed, the only item it had was urgent items, which there probably won't be any, and apart from that it was just agreeing minutes. Well, we're here to represent the people of Maidstone, and at the moment we're not doing our job as a council, and I think we've just got to start to see some policies coming through from the administration.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. The points are well made and I'm sure previously felt by the committee, and that's why we've chosen that way forward. On the other item though, I mean, we can consider what's on our agenda, but if you're talking about a town centre strategy update, I would probably send that via a member agenda item request. So if you check that out in the constitution and then obviously write in before our next meeting, then we can decide on whether we accept that agenda item request as a committee next time. So that would probably be my way forward on that one. Over to Councillor Mackay, please.
Thank you. When I first joined this council, I was amazed how the budget for the following financial year was left so late. And that was 12 years ago. This may be an extreme example this financial year, but it's always. And I'd come from working for a large multinational, running a business unit, and I was expected to start on my budget in May. And the financial year started on the 1st of January the following year. So, but what I would say is that what we're waiting to be presented with is a full budget. Well, a budget is made up of different aspects. Some are contentious, some are not. Now, I don't see why that we can't look at some aspects of the budget coming forward separately, as this is what we propose to do. You're not going to decide everything at one meeting. Things there is many items on a budget. So it's like eating an apple, it's made up of many bites. Let's have a nibble before, rather than be expected to eat the whole basket in one go. Anyway, just my wee suggestion there.
A nice analogy, Councillor Mackay. Don't forget we've got the fees and charges coming, so that is one of the points, obviously. Capital budget will come separate from the revenue budget, thank you. And but don't forget that we don't get the local government finance settlement until December. So there are some pieces that can be put down, but really until we do get that from government, that's probably the last piece that slots in, and that does come quite late in the day. So I'm assuming that the pieces are moving, but we're not right ready to see it. But as you say, we are up to the wire on this. Councillor Cannon.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on Lottie's point about discretionary rate relief. I mean, if there is an idea on changing some of that, because I understand that to be small business relief, rural relief and charity relief. I think it all comes under discretionary rate relief. I may be wrong, but if there is a change to that, then there might be a case of wanting to scrutinise that. That's just sort of my thoughts, because obviously it's important that you're supporting small businesses in the town centre and all those other elements.
I believe this is more to do with discretionary rate relief for the council tax. I'm looking to Councillor Wales to see if he knows, but that's the council tax relief scrape. Okay. Okay, perfect. So what does the committee feel about having a look at the pre-decision scrutiny on that then? Would you like to have a look at it? Yep. Okay, that's agreed. So Cassie, could we add that one to our programme, please? Thank you, Councillor Cannon. And I've got Councillor Field again.
Yes, I wanted to comment on Councillor Mackay's contribution. I think I understand where you're coming from, and as the Chair says, obviously we're constrained somewhat by when central government sets council budget rounds. But I think in terms of how we think about the forward plan and this committee's opportunity to impact those budgetary concerns, it's the policy process. So some of it, as we see tonight, we have the Policy Advisory Committee has already contributed. It's really on the policy rather than the numbers that I think this committee ought to be calling it in, because once the policy is adopted, the numbers will simply follow. And if we wait until the numbers, I would argue that we've perhaps missed our opportunity to influence the thinking of the executive. It's just a view that I wanted to share with the committee. On the relief rate, I mean, obviously we've agreed to take it in, but similar sort of issue really is pick out the policy point, and of course we don't have to call all of this in to overview and scrutiny. I do agree with Councillor Harper that because of where we are in terms of our overall policy and governance, there's rather thin gruel on some committees at the moment, but obviously that will build over time, and I'm just conscious perhaps we shouldn't let our frustration at the thin gruel we're presented with at the moment cause us to build us enormous agendas that will have us here all night further down the road, because I fear that will dilute the scrutiny we give to things that we will need to give proper scrutiny to in due course.
Thank you. Probably just my final word on the forward plan from the Chair is that I noticed that the Maidstone House and the linked decarbonisation was back on the forward plan. I mean, this has gone round the houses a lot, hasn't it? But I was cognisant of the press release today that it might be parked for a bit. But having said that, if this is coming back on, it can only be because the tender costs have gone even higher. So I wonder whether we should have another look at that, but I don't know how the committee feel about, if it does come back, having another look. Councillor Field.
I would urge that we wait until the facts are in. I know what my own instincts for that are. I suspect they're not that different from the rest of the committee, but until we know what the picture is, I think we can't. Be difficult to preemptively call in, but perhaps if we just note that.
Well, we'll see if it gets maybe removed for next month then. Right, that concludes us for agenda item 12, which is the forward plan. So now we're moving on to agenda item 13, which is what we've currently got on our work programme. So you can see we've got our main big review topics still on there of the enforcement, section 106, which was the waste crime enforcement, sorry, I must specify, section 106 and SIL, and then we've got the planning enforcement to come. And then on page 18 of your agenda packs, these are the items that we've pulled from the forward plan previously and requested pre-decision scrutiny on. So you can see that we have got the MTFS capital programme on there, and we have got any items relating to the strategic plan or the budget making. So, but we are obviously, as previously stated, awaiting dates on those, and we will get that information for you. Unless anyone's got any comments on what we've currently got on. No, I'll move us on to item 14, which is the update on the environmental and waste crime enforcement review. It's the scrape update, and the head of environmental services has provided this committee with an update which went out by email on the 4th of October, but is also in your agenda packs for item 14. And this item is for noting. Are there any questions, or are we happy to note this? Noted. Thank you. That moves us on to item 15, which is the Housing Allocation Scheme Review. That's pages 20 to 69 of our agenda packs. This report is going to be introduced by the Cabinet Member for Housing and Homelessness, Councillor Wales. Thank you, Councillor Wales, for that introduction. And just to remind the committee that we have got our Housing Solutions Manager, Tony Stewart, in attendance kindly this evening as well, if you've got any questions to ask him of the scheme. I was subbing last night on that housing pack, and I just think the committee all thought that the family connection, to remove it completely, it's quite constrained anyway. It's immediate family only, and the family has to have lived in the borough for 5 years. We just were conscious of like the responsibility of carers, and that actually they do an awful lot for social care within the borough. So to remove that as part of the housing allocation, we thought we weren't quite all right with that. That's why we did the amendment to it. But obviously this is one of our statutory responsibilities and one of the most important things that we do for our residents. So I think it's quite good that we've got it at this committee to have a bit more of a look at it and the changes that are proposed. I've got Councillor Wilkinson first to kick it off. Thank you.
Regarding the larger households and allowing them to bid on properties that aren't within their eligibility, I just wanted to know what the timeline would be if this policy was put through, because I've been trying to get this policy changed for about a year because of being contacted by residents who are in this situation. I've got somebody who's the family of 8 in a 2-bedroom flat. So I was just wondering what the timeline would be if the policy was put through.
First of all, sorry if I keep coughing tonight. I do apologise. I've got a tickly throat. Yeah, I mean, what we're looking for, if we can get agreement and it goes to Cabinet next month, we're hoping, I think, in December, would be to implement the policy, hopefully around April the 1st. Regarding a particular point, because what we'd have to do beforehand, we'd have to go out to all the registered providers and have a consultation process with them, and then write to any applicant or all the applicants to inform them that we're changing, etc. So there's a little bit of work to do before we can actually implement it, but we would be hopeful to get it around, if not April the 1st, very soon after that. Regarding a specific point regarding allowing bedroom allocation to be more flexible, and I do remember the case that you originally, some time ago, originally raised. Yeah, it's not a unique case, as I'm sure you're aware. There's quite a few people in this situation. We are, to a certain extent, reliant on working with our housing association partners, because the way, and I don't want to go into too much detail because it's probably not necessary, but although we have an allocation scheme, every housing association has an allocation scheme as well. And it's not as simple as them to align with Maidstone Council, because they have units, most of them have units in other council areas. So their policy has to encompass lots of other council areas. So we need to work with, main one obviously being Golden Homes, and we need to work with them to encourage them to, when they place the adverts, that we will be able to open up the advert for, to improve any applicant's current housing situation. One of the sort of slight drawbacks will be that obviously we're still getting the same amount of units. This won't encourage more units per se, and if you're opening up all the 3-bedroom units to people that are eligible for 4 beds, there'd be more people potentially bidding for that property, but obviously there's no way around that. But sorry, so in answer to your question, hopefully April, but we are reliant on engagement with the housing associations to ensure they come on board with the process.
Can I just... Yeah, in the past I've emailed Stephanie Goad about this particular issue, and she was on board with it as well. But in relation to other areas, would that mean that other councils would need to change their policies as well in line with ours, kind of thing?
Not necessarily, because there could be more broad ways to add more broad wording. For example, our allocation scheme could state along the lines of we will, allow people to bid on properties that would assist their current household needs. But in the allocation scheme for a housing association, they could put something simply along the lines of we will work in accordance with the council's current allocation scheme. So it's a broad encompass as such. It's something not many councils do. So as I say, we are a bit. I'm sure it will be. We're very hopeful this will be okay. The Golden Homes are the main. They own nearly 2/3 of the social housing within the borough. So if we can get them on board, and 2 or 3 other of the main housing associations, which are Hyde, Town and Country Orbit, where we could cover probably 90% of the units. So there's just a bit more work to do. But we are a bit reliant, unfortunately, because we don't own our housing stock. When we get to own a lot more of our housing stock, we'll see a lot more control of it. But I don't like that case at the moment.
Thank you. Just to let the committee know, I've got the running order of Councillor Mackay, Councillor Harper, Councillor Kahili, Councillor Field and Councillor Cook. So moving to Councillor Mackay next.
Thank you. What I would like to make a point of, this problem we're in now is of Maidstone Borough Council's own making. We've had a policy for quite a considerable time of 40% of new developments over 10 units being allocated towards social housing. That is social housing, part buy, part rent, and affordable housing. Very, very few applications go through with 40%, because the developer will say, oh, but I paid a lot of money for this field, or whatever, or many other reasons, and I can't build this as well as social housing. So we've made this a rod for our own back. So I'll park that there. Regarding this policy and the amendments, I will be obliged to support it because we have to. I don't want to see families of 8 moving into a 3-bedroom house, but it's better than keeping them in a 2-bedroom flat. So it is with a heavy heart I will vote for this, but hope we can get back to a period of sense in time. And I know it's not going to be tomorrow, it's probably not going to be in my lifetime even, but you know, you've got to get on a track and move towards it. And so take that thought back with you next time you go to planning or you oppose a development. Every development is an opportunity for more housing for people that are homeless or in inappropriate housing. There is just one other point I'd like to raise. 4 years ago, I believe it is, Maidstone Borough Council was delighted to introduce its PET policy, which basically said those moving into social housing had a right to take their certain pets with them. I see no mention of this policy in this document in front of us. And I would just like a clause in it that says the current Maidstone pet policy will apply to all conditions within this. And I expect you could comment upon that. Could we include something along those lines?
Yeah, it's not. It's obviously not included at the moment because it was seen as a review of the actual allocation policy. It's not actually in the current allocation policy either. Mention of the PET policy, but something can be. I can't see any issue with a paragraph being added along the lines of we will work, as you suggested, that the PET policy could be incorporated into any of the direct lets that we made as such. I can't see there being an issue. The exact words, and I can't think of the top of my head, but I can't see there'd be an issue with actually adding to it.
I don't know which came first, the review or the PET policy. So I know we are complying with the PET policy at the moment. So, but when I read in this statement that certain criteria will not be given an opportunity to decline suitable accommodation, that makes me think, you know, because that was our case. And what we were doing some years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago, we were taking homeless people off the street who had a small pooch, typically, finding them emergency accommodation, and then telling them oh no, you can't take your pooch with you. And this resulted in one case, and I'm ashamed to say I've forgotten his name, committed suicide. And it started a campaign started by Dee Bonnet to introduce this pet policy. So I just want some words included in this that say we will comply with our own policy, our own pet policy.
Thank you. I think what I understand from what the officer was saying is that the housing allocation policy exists and the pet policy exists. It's just that is not referenced within this, but that perhaps you could add a sentence to reference it. But both are still existing. It's not that one has fallen away. It's just that all we have in front of us tonight is the housing allocation, how we allocate that stock to the different bands. Councillor Field wanted to come in on this specific point, so I'll go there first, and then I will have Councillor Kahili next. Oh no, sorry, Councillor Harper next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just on this specific point, thank you, Mr. Stewart, for your comments. And I don't expect you to have an answer to this off the top of your head, but I wonder if you could provide the committee with the answer to the question of, have our major local housing providers adopted compliance with Maidstone Borough Council's pet policy since it was adopted by the council? I'd be happy for a written response.
Yeah, I will have to get back to you on that particular point. A lot of just to clarify, my role is not with the homelessness team, which generally speaking is where the direct lets and the suitability would come in, and therefore the pet policy would come in. That sits with Hannah Gaston's homelessness team. It's all relevant, I do appreciate that, but she would have more information on that, but I've got no problem. I can discuss with her and we can get back to you.
That would be great if we could have a written response. Thank you very much.
Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I'd like to support obviously what Rob and Malcolm were saying on the pets thing. I do remember that after this council adopted it, it was actually taken up and raised in Parliament by our MPs, and we were like the first council in the country to adopt a pets policy, and it was something we were really proud of, and I think we still are proud of. So I think it's incumbent to have a cross-reference, however it is, between the two. And picking up actually something else Malcolm said was about the lack of housing. I mean, I was at the Planning and Healthier Communities Policy Advisory Committee sitting in here just over, well, exactly a week ago, actually. And we had a report about community infrastructure money, SIL money, and also Section 106 about what's been collected in the last year and what's been paid out. And one of the biggest sources of these were developments across the borough where the developers did not provide the 40% affordable housing, but instead gave a commuted payment to the council. And they've been doing that over the years, not actually providing it themselves, but working out a figure and giving it to us for the council then to try to get some arrangements made on it. Well, the trouble is, the money will be sitting, probably not earning any interest with us, and at the time, we all know all the cost of buildings are rocketing up. So, well, you might have given money, I don't know, say, for instance, for 100 units 5 years ago, that would probably only provide 10 or 20 units now if you actually went ahead and do it. So I think that there's a big issue for us to be looked at, which actually links in, I think, with our the council house programme now, which used to be the 1,000 affordable homes, because one of the things I think perhaps we should ask the cabinet member Simon to think about is that when we are developing our own schemes, rather than just constantly doing 2 and 3 bedroom flats and perhaps 1 4-bedroom property, which seems to be the typical mix coming forward, massive emphasis on flats, we should perhaps be starting to look at providing a considerable number of larger units, because the town's generally becoming flooded with 2-bedroom flats. But what it's not getting is any family-size housing, especially for social tenants. And I'm a bit, we look at paragraph 15.1, the bedroom allocation, which we're using the Secretary of State's methodology. Well, the last bullet point now is 2 children aged under 10 years, regardless of sex. Okay, so they get allocated 1 bedroom. They're not going to be under 10 years forever, are they? They might be allocated 1 room for the 2 of them when they're 9, and the following year they both become 10, but they're stuck in that same bedroom for how long? I do think we have to work out how we're going to start to provide larger properties, because that is one of the fundamental problems we've got in terms of people being in, as was said earlier, undersized accommodation. You want to go into a 2-bedroom property. I'm not saying we're a run of overstacked with them, but it's relatively easier. But if you want to, as soon as you want to go into a 3-bedroom property, you're sort of stuck on this waiting list. And the other thing I noticed, and I just perhaps is more of a question, is that on para 1.1, I don't know, there's not a page number, but it's lettings not covered by the policy. I just wanted to understand about urgent housing issues. So, for instance, if we have a case where there may be a tenant currently housed being subject to victimisation by neighbours or by their community, how would we go about addressing the requirement to move those people in terms of their safety as a urgent priority? Because I can't see that, unless I've missed it, it's a long document, referenced in here. And I have dealt with issues such as that both here and elsewhere in the past, where it becomes really critical to move someone very fast.
Do you want to go for that question, Mr. Stewart? Councillor Wales, one of you two?
Yeah, again, I don't mean to sound, the last thing I want to sound like it's not my role, but generally speaking, if people are in an emergency situation, i.e. that situation, or a domestic abuse situation, or maybe a structural issue in a house, if they contact the council, they're guided through the housing officers who are based at Trinity Foyer, sorry, called Trinity now, so there to get, there's specialist domestic abuse advisors, there's specialist people that deal with care situations, with structural information, etc. So they are guided through that process. They're assigned a housing officer, and if need be, quite often if they're already in social housing, a move is arranged within the stock of that social housing if that's possible, or as they would be offered emergency accommodation. Again, it's not something I'm a specialist in. I don't mean to sound, but I don't want to start guessing something that I don't know the answer to, but that would be the process of it.
Thank you. Councillor Kahili.
Thank you. I've got quite a few points, sorry. First one is on the report from the housing, point 216 about how saying it is generous compared to other councils. It is. Keep your standards up, don't lower them, because some of the other councils are shocking. And as somebody who every winter deals with people who don't qualify for housing for a variety of reasons, Maidstone Borough Council really are one of the better ones. You really, really are. So please don't lower your standards at all. Other councils need to raise theirs. What concerns me is that if we change these, what is the consistency against other borough councils? Because, for argument's sake, someone living at Wateringbury will be in Tunbridge and Malling, for argument's sake, and their policies, if they differ, I don't know what the policies are, so I might be talking out of turn here. So you've lived somewhere for 2 years, you go and you move in with a partner who's the next village along. If you split up with that person and you've been out of that borough for 2, out of this one for 3, or whichever way it falls, no one's going to help you. And we have this time and time again, people trying to prove that they've been in a borough for a certain length of time, or they haven't. And a lot of homelessness that comes to us, at least, is through relationship breakdown. So I think you need to consider the returning resident thing. Not having that really, really bothers me, because people move away, and supposing you've been a bit itinerant, which a lot of the guests that come to us are, You've lived Ashford for a year, that relationship broke down. You moved in with somebody in Tunbridge, that broke down. You moved in with somebody else in Tunbridge. You still haven't been here those years to qualify for anybody. So the returning resident is valid in those cases, because if that's where a parent lived or where you grew up, this is where your support network, your parents might not be here, your siblings may no longer be here, but that's where you grew up. And especially if you're somewhere like really close to a border of boroughs, the issues around alcohol, drugs, mental health, your support network is often not necessarily people from so the other side of Yalding, which might be just into another borough, might be using Maidstone services. It doesn't, the NHS doesn't automatically flow in the same boroughs as us. So that's just some things to remember, or to think about, sorry. And the specialised housing units, I take it they are still being built, as in for people that need wheelchair adapted and all those, they're still being built in all of the building that we are having.
Yeah, on that, again, that is, I sound like Parry, but it's a planning policy. So we do ask, and going back to points earlier on about larger households, getting the 40% as a housing enabling officer, which I am as well, we're always asking for this, but it's a planning decision ultimately. Not That's not no, to put it on anyone else. It's just ultimately a planning decision. Viability comes into it, etc. At all. Specialist housing, there is a fair bit of stock already within the borough. We do ask for them on new developers as well, and generally we do get some that have got flush wall showers and those sort of things. What we find is that people at the moment apply as a medical reason because they think they're going to get priority, but they might not need adapted housing. So it's a separate thing, really. We want a separate band for people that need adapted housing to be able to get the adapted housing, as opposed to just a medical need. Just because you've got a medical need doesn't necessarily mean you need adapted housing. Could do, but that makes sense. So it's just to be a bit clear. We're not actually changing anything. We're actually just making it clearer in the policy. That's what we're doing, really.
Thank you for that explanation. Is that all right, Councillor Keeley? Move on. Okay, got Councillor Field next.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of things. Some have already been touched on. If you indulge me, first of all, I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to put to Mr. Stewart, and then one or two things that I'd like to put to the Cabinet member, and then we'll see where we go from there. So I'd like to go back to the larger household issue that we discussed, Mr. Stewart. Are you aware of what formal influence or mechanisms exist currently with our providers of the housing to influence their policy decision?
Sorry, just to clarify, what with regard new builds as such, or sorry, just
no, I apologise. So to be more specific, with relation to influencing their policy position on whether they would accept, for example, a 5-member family into a 3-bedroom house rather than a 4-bedroom house.
Sorry, I misunderstood. No, I mean currently at the moment, and has been the case since the time I've been at the council. It's not been an issue, but our policy has always been to go with the bedroom criteria of what the standard is. So if you meet a 4-bedroom need, you can bid on 4-bedroom properties. We've had conversations. There have been a few instances in the past. We've had specific conversations about specific households. It does vary from who you speak to sometimes, and also on sometimes on where the actual plot is. If it's a what's seen as not such a desirable place, shall I say, and there's a struggle to get rid of a property, they might be more acceptable to accept a household that doesn't fit the size. But what we want to try and achieve is we've got to be fair to everyone. So if we're allowing one 3-bedroom household to bid on a property, we've got to allow all the 3-bedroom properties to bid on housing. We've got to be fair and transparent, obviously. So probably an answer to your question, no, we haven't got into detail with them yet, but we are very hopeful that we should be able to progress it.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart, and if you'll indulge. For Councillor Wales then. First of all, on that point, I'm sure all of us here are keen that Maidstone Borough Council doesn't adopt policy that providers simply won't observe. So can I urge you on that to explore avenues for formal recognition of what our key providers do within the boundaries of the borough, within their own policy. There ought to be a way, it seems to me. I'd also like to pick up on Councillor Keeley's point, particularly around family breakdown and domestic abuse, where those issues arise outside of Maidstone Borough but concern people who have an historic connection, family or otherwise, to the borough. And I think it's important that we don't get too tied into the word family. We had right to return of a resident, which is an all-encompassing definition. I think someone who has resided in the borough, it's indisputable, we have records, etc. Family these days is a somewhat looser term, and family isn't for everybody kith and kin. For some people it's people we've become friends with over time. For some people it's different relationships. I think there's a risk if we get too hooked into family without a proper definition of what family is, that we miss some obvious pitfalls, such as those that Councillor Keeley has highlighted. So I don't think there's something at this point that I would want to frame in sort of a formal proposition, but I would strongly urge you, Councillor Wales, to consider those sorts of implications, particularly as Councillor Keeley has very accurately pointed out. This borough has some extremely close connections. I mean, Wateringbury is an excellent example. Forgive my language, but one can spit in Tunbridge and Walling from Maidstone. The borough boundary between Tunbridge and Walling and Maidstone is an arbitrary one to the people that live here, and their social connections and so on and so forth are far more important. And I just want to make sure that we are properly observing our duty of care. And I think Councillor Keeley also makes an excellent point around things like family breakdown and domestic abuse, that many of our residents do live perhaps slightly more chaotic lives than is typical, but nonetheless we should make sure that we have proper safety nets in place to support those residents, whether they had a relationship in Tunbridge and Morling that failed, or they had a relationship in Medway that failed. We should have reasonable safeguards for those predictable circumstances. And I'm sure you're aware, and other members of the committee may be aware of the case, I believe it was in Southwark just last month, where a young woman who, from what I could gather on the news, I don't have anything more than that, did have a somewhat chaotic life. She also had 3 children of preschool age, or it may have 2 or 3 children of preschool age, and the police had put in a protection order saying that she should leave that borough for her safety. And the local housing authority in Southwark, I think it was Southwark, apologies if I've got that wrong, said that they had to follow the guidance of the Metropolitan Police Service. No other London borough had any obligation to support this woman, so she was faced with being literally street homeless with 2 preschool children, because in formulating a policy such as this, proper account hadn't been taken to the full suite of risks. And I note that the pack last night talked about the equality impact assessment. The equality impact assessment, in my view, must fully scope those kinds of risks because those kinds of residents very much are part of the community that we have here in Maidstone Borough Council. So before you sign off on the policy, I would urge you in the strongest terms to satisfy yourself that those risks around right to return and family connections are properly covered with the safety net that you and your fellow cabinet members choose to adopt. The only thing I want to say, I don't want to stop any other members speaking at this point, but I do think it is important that we ensure that we adequately give a formal response that echoes what the Policy Advisory Committee said last night. Thank you.
At this point, I'm just going to jump in because I think we do need to just have clarity on what the committee did last night and what we would be looking to do. So we've got the, so there is a housing allocation scheme currently. That's the one we've got in the appendix. This administration are looking to change that housing allocation scheme from what we already have. The main bits of the changes are to the local connection criteria. So we currently have resident for 2 years. They wants to change to 3 years. We currently have the family connection. We currently have the employment connection, and we currently have the returning resident connection. So what is looking to is to take the family and returning resident criteria removed from that. The employment criteria remains, and the current resident criteria changes from 2 years to 3 years. That is option A on the papers. That was accepted last night, but with the amendment to put the family connection back in, essentially, not remove it. So if we're looking to bring either the returning, I've heard mostly talk about the returning resident connection, that would need to be a further amendment that this committee would recommend to option A to bring that item back in as well to the local connection. So I just want to just frame what we're looking to do, because that is option A as amended once, and potentially the committee may amend further. We've got option B, which is don't accept any of the proposed changes to the scheme that we currently have. We've got option C, which is accept your proposed changes, but obviously not the ones paras 3.12 to 3.21. Or option D, which is none, and that is not recommended. So your recommended options on the paper were A, as amended last night to bring back the family. We've been talking about the local connection, so I think that's what we probably just need to bottom out, whether we're going to try, whether the committee wants to have another amendment to add that back in. 1 second, sorry. Councillor Field first. I'm going to come to Councillor Harper, and then I've got Councillor Cook patiently waiting. So Councillor Field first.
So I agree entirely. That's the position, and as I said, I didn't want at this point to stifle contributions from other members of the committee by moving a formal position. I think there probably is something around ensuring that the amendment around family satisfactorily provides a safety net for previous residents of the borough who have suffered particularly family breakdown, domestic abuse. But I don't want to take that any further.
I'm going to come back. They're two slightly separate things within that main bit itself. So we've got the 4 things within that local connection criteria. So there's the family one, which is separate from the returning resident one. So I'm not sure whether you could combine the returning resident one into the family one. Might need to reach for an amendment that talks about the returning resident part of it. I'm going to see, are you on this point, Councillor Parfitt, or because okay, well, I'm going to just wait for a minute if you don't mind. So Councillor Harper first, and then Councillor Cook.
Yeah, well, I'd like to move an amendment then that we recommend the Cabinet to adopt option A, subject to the inclusion of the local connection criteria. So that's residents, but it's in paragraph 214, isn't it? I think we should adopt those, because that's what we've been discussing. If that's what's being taken out, we should put those, I'm suggesting that we should put these back in, as they're written in that paragraph.
So, sorry, I'm going to keep clarifying this. So we're going to we recommend that we go with that option A. We need to pick up our own amendment on the family and the local connection. So that would be putting those two items back into the housing allocation scheme. So quite right, 3.14 is what we would be taking out. So we will be taking out the bit that says the current family and returning resident criteria will be removed. Well, that's what we'll be recommending to the cabinet to do, obviously. So it's their decision ultimately. The advice from last night was one. The advice from tonight seems to be that we're moving to a motion to put those two back in. I'm now going to come to Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I um, agree that the family connection is something that definitely needs to go back in. But we are moving the thresholds on all of these things. So it's all very well saying that Maidstone does this better than other districts, but we need to hold ourselves up to the highest possible standards that we're able to, and not just say, well, we do better than others, so that's okay. We're making it more difficult for people to get suitable housing by saying, well, instead of 5 years for a family connection, it's now 6, and you know, in other areas we're doing the same thing. I Malcolm won't thank me for this, but I agreed with what he was saying, and I think we do need to support A as amended by the PAC last night, because I think there needs to be proper consensus. But there are two other areas, Madam Chairman, I wanted to highlight in terms of where people end up on the street and homeless through no fault of their own. And so there are three things I'm going to mention, and I'm going to ask Simon to take it away and look at two of them in particular, please. Maidstone Borough Council are a signatory to the Armed Forces Covenant, and that's in there. I know it's always been in there, but the ask is, what more can we do? The other area that I'm particularly keen on, we have a lot of care leavers that are in the Maidstone area as well, and when they leave care, they are looking for homes as well. Frequently they can't get on the register because they don't meet any criteria. I think there needs to be a criteria built into this, and not just from Maidstone. This needs to go across all of the districts where there is a housing responsibility. We collectively are all corporate parents to these children, and we have a duty to support them and help them to the best of our ability. So I'd really like to see a proper policy introduced to supporting care leavers as well. These are kids that are 18. They don't have a family to go back to. They're on their own. So they need help and support. So I'd like that taken into account as well, if there was some way. And then, Madam Chair, the other thing that feeds into this, which is very prevalent in certain parts of our district, and it's certainly in an area that I'm very familiar with, we have a lot of multi-generational households. And by this I'm talking about 3, 4 generations, sometimes even more. In terms of family connections, well, they're all piling in. We've got to find a way of dealing with that in a more sensible way as well, looking to the future, because it's not good. And I hope that some of what we're talking about in terms of the flexibility in the scheme, with people in 2 bedrooms that really need 4, but they can now apply for 3. I think that type of thing is actually just applying some common sense and finding a way to recognise that common sense in a policy statement that meets that need. So in that sense, I have that support. I think we need to apply that common sense in some other areas as well, and I have been for a long time a strong advocate of the Armed Forces Covenant. A lot of those people don't like to ask for help, but they end up on the street all the same because they're too proud to ask for help. And the care leavers is an important one for me. So thank you, Claudine.
Thank you. Sorry. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cook, you raise an excellent point on children leaving care. On page 43, I think it is, or point 43 of the actual policy, on page 30 of the actual policy, you may be able to see it's 65 on the papers. It's in our watermark, so it's tough to spot. The Council's adopted definition of family within this policy is defined as, for the purposes of this allocation scheme, family will mean immediate family. This will include siblings, parents and children. Clearly that doesn't necessarily lead to an interpretation that would include foster children or children that have been brought up in a care home within the borough. So I would like to move an amendment at this point that this committee recommends that the Cabinet consider an addition to the allocation policy of an extension of the definition of family to children who received foster care within the borough or were in a care home in the borough. I think it's important when we do this, we've raised some excellent points tonight, but if we don't make formal recommendations, we won't move forward. I'm happy to take comments on the wording of that, but I do think you raised a really important point, and our definition of family, as I read it, would exclude foster children and would exclude children that were raised in care.
No, before I take anyone else, we do need some points of clarification from the officer. So first point first, that armed forces question from Councillor Kick. Councillor Wells, will you take that offline and reply to him on email? But coming to Mr. Stewart, I think there are a few pieces in here about foster carers. It does it from the people who are the foster carers or adopters, and I just think the committee would like a bit of clarity on how that would then encompass the children that are under their care. So I think you were indicating earlier, so I'm going to give the floor to you to explain that a bit more, if you might.
Yeah, we are actually waiting regarding carers, care leavers. There's going to be some national guidance due very soon. We've been informed. It's last month, September, October. We were informed that, so we are awaiting clarification because much like the armed forces, a lot of what we can put in our scheme we can decide at a local level, but there are certain criteria and certain reasonable preference categories that we have to. So the care leavers, we are waiting for guidance. Sorry, the carers and care leavers, we are waiting for further guidance, which apparently is imminent from national government about how they would like that cohort to be included in everyone's allocation scheme. The armed forces are already in there under that, and there are exceptions, like if you, for example, if you're suffering domestic abuse, if you approach as homelessness, where you avoid these criteria as such. So there are a lot of exceptions already from the resident family employment return resident, which are already put in there.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, some of these specialist categories of very high risk, like the care leavers and some of the armed forces, they hit above this policy, so they will go straight through, as it were.
Yeah, they in effect bypass the
whole
policy.
Of this.
Yes, yeah, they already get a local connection, housing need by the very nature of what their situation is, if you see what I mean.
Okay.
And the care leavers and the carers, I say we're waiting for further
You're awaiting
clarification
that guidance,
about
and
that.
then
Which
that will go straight in
yeah,
ahead as well.
yeah.
Quickly, Councillor Cook.
The problem, Madam Chairman, particularly with the care leavers, is yes, they get onto the register, but they don't get onto the register with sufficient priority to be given a home. That's the problem. You've got it's one thing being being given a few points in terms
I'm
of
probably
how
going to stop you there because I think what Mr. Stewart was saying, and I just don't want to
Look,
miss
I
the point,
accept what he
is
says.
that, thank you,
All right.
is that he's saying they hit above all of this allocation.
They
So
don't.
in effect, they're getting priority out before this allocation list itself. That's what you were saying?
They get accepted onto the register, but the way Maidstone Council's priority works, we don't do points. We don't do a hierarchy banding like a lot of councils do. We don't do an A, B, C, D. The bandings are done by the household characteristics, which hopefully is explained in the report and in the policy at the moment. Unfortunately, the in a nutshell, there's not enough houses to go round. That units to go round. That's stating the bleeding obvious, I'm afraid. But that is that's so. However, I do appreciate what everyone's saying and take on board what everyone's saying. I'm sorry if I'm going off something I shouldn't say, but however you divvy up the houses and units, for want of a better way, there's when you prioritise one cohort, you deprioritise another one. If you see what I mean, so it's ultimately there's not enough to go round. Sorry to be.
No, I think...
With respect, Madam, on a point of order...
Gone very quick now.
Yeah, because that's basically what I was saying. And what I'm asking for is, can we please have a look at how that scheme works in relation to 18-year-old care leavers who are becoming responsible for looking after themselves, so that we can have some sort of system that gives them a reasonable chance of finding a home in the district that they associate themselves with most, which sometimes is Maidstone. It might be Tunbridge and Malling. They might want to go and live in Wateringbury. Who knows? But
Okay, thank you.
I'm not looking for something this evening. I'm looking for a commitment that we, as an authority, will. And this is really for Simon. We will have a look at that and take it seriously and look to make things better for this group of young people.
I mean, I think I'll probably just round that off by saying we've got the cabinet member in the room. This has been through one pack. We are doing pre-decision scrutiny. This will go to cabinet. They'll look at it again. It may well get refined and changed a little bit before you have it at your meeting. And obviously that is a public meeting, so anyone can go and give their reps at that meeting. Cabinet member decision. Is it your individual cabinet member decision, or it's going to the cabinet meeting?
It says cabinet member on the report.
Okay, maybe we need some clarification on that then, because it's different if it's going to an individual member for decision or going to the cabinet itself. But...
Chair, I have a
go on.
minor point of order. I did formally raise an amendment, and so the amendment must stand or fall. This is the opportunity in the process. I know that the focus in the papers is on what officers are recommending they make changes to. The reason for my amendment, based both on Councillor Cook's contribution and the policy, and therefore how the policy may be interpreted, both in the glossary that I've already drawn your attention to, members, and under clause 12.2 of the policy, which is the document which will drive officer decisions, there is no explicit explanation that a foster child or a child that's been in care falls under the policy. All I am asking in the amendment is that in the glossary, the cabinet member considers defining family to include foster children and children in care. So,
what I was
under my
getting
point
at,
of order, I would
thank
just
you for your
like
point
to
of order,
ask if
but
someone
what I was
would
getting
second
at
that.
is that Appendix A is the existing policy. current. So what I was trying to get you to reach for, and maybe you'll come back with, is the clear amendment wording to the options. They can change Appendix A however they want, because this is the existing allocation scheme, not the one that they're reaching for. So what we need from the committee is the clear wording of the amendment so that the committee can vote on that. If you can do that now, fantastic.
On that basis, I'm happy to withdraw that specific amendment, but when we come to what this committee is going to recommend on the totality of the review of the housing allocation scheme, I will be looking for a form of words, should it be seconded by a fellow member of the committee, that expands the definition to include foster children and children in care within the borough.
No, but I also don't need to come up with the draft amendment for those words unless I will consult with the Democratic Services Officer. Perhaps we'll have a 5-minute recess and you can come up with some words, because we need an actual wording for the amendment for the committee to vote on. That's what we need to do. Councillor Parfitt, before we have an adjournment for 5 minutes.
No, please. Everybody else has spoken. I can see the basis for which, for example, the families being able to apply for smaller houses than they perhaps would want, but is better than their current situation. I can see how that's come about, because we've actually had that in real time, families in that situation. So that, to me, is a logical amendment to this policy. What hasn't been made clear is why the changes for removing the returning resident, why we're removing the family connection. So we've all input lots of extra things that we would like to be included, which is great. But the issue is, and I hate to pour cold water on this, the number of houses that we have available is the number of houses we have available. And so effectively, the wider we make the scope, as Stuart said, we are just going to be in a situation where more people are fighting for less houses. And I suppose what I would like answered is why we chose, what the rationale was for removing the family and the returning resident. Is it because we know we've got so many people on the register that we haven't got a hope of some of those people ever finding accommodation, so we're trying to reduce those number of people on the register? Thank you.
Both Councillor Wales, Mr. Stewart. Thank you. And I think, the ultimate driver between the original 1,000 affordable houses was that at that time we had 800 households on the register. I think you can already see that we've gone up from 800 and as at 31st of March, we're on 1,305. So that is the very reality of the situation that we're facing. Councillor Harper, you had indicated, I'm going to come to you next.
Yeah, I had moved an amendment in terms of the local connection criteria, and I'm looking on page 28 where we can see what the proposal currently is. So if we look at it, it's suggested to be amended that the residential criteria be changed from the current 2 years to 3 years, and that the family returning resident criteria be removed, that the employment criteria remains as currently stated. So what I'm proposing as an amendment is that the current residential criteria to remain at 2 years, and that the current family and returning resident criteria be kept as they are currently, which is listed on whatever paragraph I said earlier. Yeah, in paragraph 2.14. So family is immediate family that's been residing within the borough for a continuous period of 5 years prior to the application. And returning resident is been residing within the borough for a continuous period of at least 2 of the last 5 years, which, that's a current criteria, and it does largely pick up what Councillor Keeley was raising as an important point. I think it's important that we keep these sorts of policies. Yes, I'm as much a realist as anybody else and knows that, unfortunately, some of the people on the housing waiting list will be there for a very long period of time. And like in lots of councils, people will be there for generations before they ever get a house because their lists are so long. But as a council, I think we have to have a list which reflects what we believe are the right criteria, not one where we try to manipulate it to keep people off. So it looks like we're housing more people. And that's my worry, that by removing these criteria, people won't be able to get on, and so they won't be included. And so returning residents will have no hope of getting on it. They won't get a property in Maidstone, full stop, because if you've moved out of the borough for 5 minutes, you're no longer considered to have a link with the borough.
Okay, thank you.
So I think it's
So I've heard your amendment, and I think I don't want to open the debate up again. I think we've heard lots and lots and lots and lots of different reasons. I think we just need to reach for wording for the amendment now, because I am hearing the same points coming. And I think actually what encompasses all of what Councillor Harper just said is that we will retain the local connection criteria. The local connection criteria is the heading that encompasses the resident, the family, the employment, and the returning resident. Basically, it keeps that allocation band, that local connection criteria, as is currently. So I will reach for the wording, which will be that we are minded to approve option A with the amendment that the committee seeks to retain the local connection criteria along with all of its subsidiaries as in the current policy. Do I have a seconder? Oh, Councillor Field.
I would also like added to the proposed amendment that the policy's definition of family adequate encompasses care leavers, as raised by Councillor Cook. So I'm happy to second the amendment, subject to the caveat that we make that amendment to the policy to include care leavers.
Okay, so I'm going to read it out. So the committee proposes that we will accept option A, but we wish to retain the local connection criteria band as per the current policy, and we wish the new allocation scheme to update the definition of family to specifically include looked after children and children in care. care leavers. Sorry, thank you. So I have a proposer, Councillor Harper. I have a seconder, Councillor Field. Votes in favour? Votes against? Abstentions? Oh, sorry, I didn't vote. I'm in favour. Sorry. So that is passed. Thank you. We don't record separately. Lovely. Thank you very much. That moves us on to item 16, which is the update of our work that we've been doing as the committee. So that's our work on Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy Review, our working group update. And I turn now to our Democratic Services Officer, who's going to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, members. This report outlines the progress so far by the working group for the Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy Review, and asks the committee to note the report. Attached to Appendix 2 is the amended timeline, and Appendix 1 you'll see minutes from the meeting of the working group on the 17th of October. The working group were given updates on the parish and ward member survey on non-strategic neighbourhood SIL, which has since been circulated on the 18th of October and is due to finish on the 17th of November. There have been 31 interactions with the survey so far. If you represent a parish council or a ward that is unparished or partially parished, if you could please fill this out and encourage other members to do the same. If you represent more than one parish, you just need to fill out a survey for each parish that you represent. External stakeholders were invited on the 15th of October to interview with the working group, including Kent County Council, Highways and KCC Education as well, and several academy trusts, including Valley and Victor Academies, Lee Academy Trust, Woodard Trust and Coppice Partnership Primary. An officer from KCC has since responded and a date to interview is being organised. That's been done today and we'd agreed on the 5th of December as there was already a working group meeting booked in on that day. It seemed most convenient. So questions have been drafted. It was agreed in the meeting that letters should be sent out to other external stakeholders from the Integrated Care Board, which were sent by email on the 25th of October with a response deadline of the 25th of November. And as agreed during the working group meeting on the 3rd of October, a letter has been drafted from the Chairman and Vice Chairman to KCC requesting an update on the allocation of SIL and Section 106 monies, but it has been agreed to wait until after the external stakeholder interview with KCC to finalise this. The report is for noting, but happy to take any questions.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you for that, and it's I think we're clearly moving in the right direction. In terms of the schools and the local the school trusts that have been invited, could the office just tell me whether Future Schools Trust were invited as the trust that covers two of our largest academies, being Cornwallis and New Line Learning, and the impact on SIL money, that I would have hoped that they would have been invited rather than just the Lee Academy Trust, who run a few primary schools and obviously the Valley Invicta.
That one was not one of the ones that was requested in the meeting. So I had invited the ones that were requested at the meeting and by the working group subsequently afterwards. I can invite them if you would like me to.
Well, if the committee would indulge me, I think where we've got a trust that covers two schools that are incredibly involved in the outcomes for Maidstone young people, and I'm talking about New Line Learning, Cornwallis, the primary schools. I think that they should be invited to give evidence in exactly the same way that the people that have been invited. So I would, people are happy, I'd suggest that we do extend the invitation to them.
Happy to extend an invite. Is that agreed? Right, lovely, thank you. Just checking the name, Future Schools Trust. Okay, got, okay. Any other comments on the work we've done so far? Councillor Field?
Could I just come back, Councillor Cook? Gary. I just wanted to check because I know obviously you've been involved with education matters at the County Council. The Valley Invicta Trust covers 3 secondary schools and some primary schools, and it's similar for the Future Schools Trust. Are you aware of any other trusts that are operating within the borough? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason to exclude. There's no guarantee for the working group that any of these trusts will attend, and therefore, to my mind, no reason to exclude any of the trusts from participating. I'm aware. I was aware of Valley Invicta and Future Schools, just about, but I don't know if there are any others. Perhaps if we just ask for research and active schools trusts, maybe are just invited. I'm just trying to give the working group the best opportunity to receive evidence, because it's not the easiest job in the world getting people.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. You're not speaking with your microphone.
I beg your pardon. Through you, Madam Chairman, there are the church trusts and the church primary schools that operate, but they're not the 2-3 form ones. I'm trying to think.
I wonder if we should take the thinking process offline, and perhaps if anyone knows of any trusts that we've missed, if we could email Cassie, I'm sure she can extend an invite to the working group for any of the trusts that we think we've missed, because obviously we've got the KCC education side of things, so we were just specifically trying to capture those schools that weren't under the umbrella of KCC, just so that we got both views. But yeah, if anyone's got any thoughts, we can email Cassie. We don't want to restrict anyone. In fact, more than likely, we suffer from a lack of attendees, despite extending many invites. So has anyone got any other comments on where we've got to? I think I probably would just like to thank everyone that's currently on the working group for giving up your time and making sure that we are speeding along. I think, you know, and thank Cassie as well for all of her hard work to date. We've got the surveys out to the parishes and the non-parished areas, and I think Neighbourhood Seal was a particular, one meeting please, Neighbourhood Seal was a particular concern of everybody when we started this, and I think we're going to get some clarity on that issue especially. So thank you everybody for your time. That concludes our meeting for this evening. Thank you.